Hi class, let's take a few minutes and talk about our week. Okay, last week you submitted your methods section and survey. Every group should have received feedback on your survey by now. If you haven't checked in because you didn't see a score, please go ahead and do that. You should all have a lot of feedback even if you don't have a score. And the reason for this is I want to give you feedback and allow you the opportunity to make corrections before I actually grade this assignment. We have a little bit of a buffer this week because the survey was due on the 8th and the actual IRB application is due on the 22nd. So we have just a tiny bit of time to make sure that we get this right. Please ignore all the notifications. I don't know what's happening. Okay, so if you were asked to make corrections to your survey, you need to email me and let me know that you have uploaded the new survey to Canvas no later than Friday the 14th, Valentine's Day. And the reason I want you to upload it is because I want you to be able to see all the different drafts that we've gone through of the survey. If you upload each new draft to Canvas, it'll store it for us right there, and you can just click that drop down menu and see what has changed. For the most part, oh, but I need you to send me an email about it because it will not actually notify me that a new submission has been made. So I need you to go ahead and email me, let me know, hey, that submission's sitting there, I'll go in and grade it. I've received a couple of corrected surveys at this point. I believe I received 2 overnight, and you should get feedback on those in the next couple of days. You should get feedback before the 14th. The reason we need to make those corrections is several reasons. First, we need to make sure the survey addresses your research questions. Remember, the survey is the only opportunity that you have to collect data to answer those research questions. So if the survey isn't asking when it needs to, you're not going to be able to answer your research question, and then you're not going to be able to do the data analysis correctly, and it's kind of falls down the line. So we're going to make sure that those research questions are appropriately answered. The second thing is the IRB has fairly strict standards of what can and cannot be asked in a survey. You can't ask about someone's personal medical history, mental health history, family history, things like that. So we're just going to go through and double check and make sure there's nothing in those surveys that's going to flag the IRB. And then the final reason is that sometimes we ask a question that seems like it's going to get the right answer, but it needs to be wordsmithed a little bit. What answer you're looking for as you write this question. And so sometimes it's hard to take a step back and say, is that how someone else is going to interpret it? And so that's where I come in. I'm going to go through, well, that seems weird. Like if you were asking, for example, how much sleep do you get on an average night? Well, you're going to have a different answer probably between weekdays and weekends. Or how often do you wash your hands? You're going to get a vastly different answer depending on the situation that someone's in. So for example, during the day, I work in the county health department. How often do I wash my hands in the county health department versus how often do I wash my hands when I'm home with my kids? I'd venture to say that I probably wash my hands significantly more when I'm home with my kids, when I'm cooking, playing, all of those things where you get your hands dirty, more visibly dirty than when I am sitting at my desk at the county health department. So keep that in mind as you are looking at your survey questions, especially if I put comments in like, I don't know about this. Also remember that every survey question needs to ask just one question. So if you are asking about how many times do you do this and how do you feel about that, or how effective do you think that is, that really needs to be broken up into 2 questions. Last thing, be mindful of need to know versus nice to know questions. Yes, it does seem like you have a lot of wiggle room in this question asking when you have a 15 to 25 question range. Let's keep it as low as possible. We don't want to just ask extraneous questions because we have the space, but make sure that you're probing a little deeper. So on the surface, yes, it does seem like all the questions are answered, but take a step back and say, okay, if I ask this question, what rabbit hole does it start to lead me down? But don't just go down crazy semi-related route. I believe I have marked all of those questions within your surveys. It will say need to know versus nice to know. Do we really need this question? What information are you trying to get with this question? So even though this explanation has been confusing, probably will make sense if you're looking at your survey feedback. The methods feedback is going to come later. because all the time has been spent on the survey. The biggest thing that I have started to see with the methods is that you're not being very thorough in the process, in the procedure. So be thorough when you're explaining how that survey is going to go out. I know it's a lot of guesswork at this point because that survey isn't actually going to go out until sometime on the week of the 24th. Or yes, probably sometime the week of the 24th once you receive official approval from the IRB. But think about what that procedure is. Remember, you are welcome to amend the methods section after this is done, but you need to have something in place now so the IRB understands the process that you're going to go through. The other section that's a bit light is when you are describing how that survey was created. Because the survey is the only way that you have to answer the research questions, the survey is a really big part of this project. So you need to talk about how that survey was developed. How did you come up with these questions? Did you take them from other sources? Completely acceptable, as long as they're cited and you say in that method section where the stuff came from. Did you develop all the questions yourselves? Totally okay, but explain how you came up with the question format, the question themes, all of those items. Remember that one of the great hallmarks of research is that it can be replicated. No one can replicate your study, even though in reality they probably won't. No one could replicate your study in theory unless they have enough information to do so. So this section is the enough information to do so. Think of the method section kind of as, I don't know if you've ever done that peanut butter and jelly sandwich assignment where you have to write down all the instructions necessary to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and all someone has to go on is those instructions. You need to make sure that you are specific. We can always take information out if you're too specific, but you need to make sure that method section is specific. So if someone were recreating it, they know logically the thought process that you went to develop all of these things. Okay, this week we have the pre-IRB application due. The purpose of the pre-IRB application assignment is so that you're not scrambling next week to submit your actual IRB assignment. This is going to walk you through all those steps necessary to complete the IRB assignment. You will essentially need your method section and your approved survey. Do not submit a survey to the IRB that has not been approved by me. That doesn't mean that you have done the corrections to the first draft and then you assume I said it's okay. Wait until you have a graded score before you submit anything to the IRB. Why? Because if the IRB doesn't like something, they will kick it back to you and we will be doing this ping pong back and forth game, in which case it will take a lot of extra time and they may potentially reject it. One thing we do not want the IRB to do, and it sounds a little bad, but we do not want to create any thing that would make the IRB look closer at your projects. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have a lot of questions in your survey that are poorly written or that raise red flags for the IRB, then they're going to start delving deeper into those questions. In reality, your projects are fairly innocuous. They're not going to cause physical harm to anyone. They're probably not going to cause emotional harm to anyone either. That's the reality of this class. We've tried to steer you in a direction that you don't get yourselves in trouble. But we don't want the IRB to start digging and say, wait, I don't like that question, I don't like that question, I don't like that question, and then they kick it back to you and make you rewrite the whole survey. We do not want to do that. So we want it to be lovely. Everything we want to be lovely, including the methods section that is included. When I say the method section is included, I mean pieces of the method section will be copied and pasted into the boxes on the IRB application. Your entire method section will not be included, but information from it will be included. And that's why your method section is graded after the survey, because they will look very closely at the survey. And they will look at the method section as well, but they will forgive you for poor writing and things like that. I, however, want your method section to be written correctly before it is included in your final paper. So we just need to make sure that that's taken care of. Like I said, you will get feedback on those methods section in the coming days. And then the last thing, there is a research ethics quiz this week. It is due on Saturday. Please make sure that you take it on time. I cannot reopen the quizzes if they are not taken on time. I just do not have the power to reopen them, even if I wanted to. I'm just gonna click on this quiz really quick. You do not have a time limit on the quiz. You should receive your responses immediately. But remember, like all of the quizzes in this class, this is a very specific quiz. Please review the materials in advance of the quiz so you are not looking, yeah, please review the information in advance because these quizzes are pretty hard to fake it. The quizzes are written by another Health Science 391 instructor, Kaylin Maxfield. She understands the technique of having the information open and the quiz open at the same time and trying to not read it and take the quiz. She's written the quiz in a way that you can't do that, which is somewhat frustrating for you. And I apologize, but read it in advance and then attempt to answer it because sometimes they time out, though this one says it won't, but please read it in advance. But let's talk broadly about ethics. Why are we talking about ethics? Well, I know as we look at these projects that it seems like the IRB is going overboard. I understand that. However, think of all of the public health, medical, psychological, social science experiments that have been done over the last 50 to 100 years that were not necessarily ethical. Why do we need to be ethical in public health? Because people listen to us, because we have access to sensitive information. We need to make sure that we show kindness and in some cases just basic humanity to the subjects of our research projects, to the subjects of our research. We cannot take the approach in public health, in medicine, in all of these, that it's for the greater good. We need to inform people what they are getting into and abide by basic ethical guidelines. Think about some of the experiments. Tuskegee, many psychological experiments that took place between the 1940s and 1960s. Even if you've had the opportunity to read the book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, all of these experiments were done with the assumption that they were being done for the greater good. People were not informed about what was happening to them. They weren't even asked in some cases to be experimented on. Many times they didn't find out until years later what the long-term effects were. Think of the IRB a little bit like HIPAA. HIPAA protects medical information. If you work in any medical office, anything where you have access to patient information, you need to abide by the HIPAA guidelines. The IRB is kind of like that for medical research. We need to abide by the IRB guidelines to protect privacy, to protect the patient's health, to protect the patient's mental well-being. That is why we are doing this, because really awful things have happened to people. As you read through, you'll also see that the IRB wasn't really put in place until fairly recently. Some of you may have been born since the IRB was put in place. You may be older than the IRB. So think about that. Research was just doing whatever it wanted to do. Think about some of the awful things that came out of World War II experiments. This is where the IRB really starts to come from. For us, the IRB is not very meddlesome. It is a little bit inconvenient that you have to submit an IRB application, but if you are involved in true medical research, you would be submitting an IRB addendum for every single change in your experiment. My sister, for example, does medical research at Duke, and anytime she changes a patient's medication, she has to submit to the IRB, get it approved before they can move forward. Yes, this seems ridiculous. But when you think about how often a small change in medication dosing or medication has led to the death or permanent impairment of a patient, it does seem very important. When you also begin to think about some of the groups in society that have been harmed most by this medical research, for example, African American populations, where it makes it very difficult to get them to participate or cooperate with medical research now, this becomes really important. This is why when you look at some medical studies, you'll see that there's an oversampling of certain populations, often Native Americans or any other minority population, especially African Americans. It's because this experimentation has created this overall mistrust of the medical establishment. So this is why we're learning about ethics. We need ethics. If you say to yourself, someday I'm going to work in a hospital, I don't need this ethics. Yes, you do. The hospital will have an IRB board. you will have to deal with them. If you say, I'm going to go work for the county health department, I don't need this IRB. I currently run the county health department where I live. And yes, you do still need the IRB. It comes into play every single day. No matter what aspect of public health you find yourself in or healthcare administration, you will have some aspect of the IRB, whether it is called the IRB or not. Maybe it's called the regulatory board, the ethics commission. Anything like that, you will be governed by these ethical standards. So pay attention this week. This information is important, and good luck. Let me know if you have any questions as you finish up those surveys and begin those IRB applications.